Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Want to bring in a new guest today. He is Steven Ruiz. He covers the NFL and specifically quarterbacks for the Ringer. Steven, welcome to the Giants Huddle, man. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm always excited to talk about quarterback evaluation. It's really the most interesting thing in the sport to me.
Yeah, and maybe the most difficult too. And that's the
Yeah.
reason I wanted to have you on, because Kurt Warner has been putting out tweets as a Hall of Fame former MVP quarterback. He watches college quarterbacks and he comes back and says, boy, I can't figure out which one of these guys are going to be good NFL quarterbacks. So my first thought is, what the hell chance do we have in doing this correctly? And the second thought I have is, no wonder NFL teams kind of stink at this with basically a 50% hit rate in the first round, right? So as you've done this and you do the quarterback rankings for the Ringer in the NFL, so you know what it's like to watch a lot of NFL quarterback play. What do you think about just this whole process about how teams go about trying to predict and, figure out what these college quarterbacks are going to be when they get to the NFL?
Yeah, I agree with Kurt. It's really hard to translate a college offense and a quarterback's performance within a college offense to how he's going to perform in the NFL. But I think once you embrace that uncertainty, I think it becomes just a little bit easier. I think that's when people like myself, individuals, that's when I think teams become better at quarterback evaluation, is when they realize, like, I'm not watching a college prospect to see him perform like an NFL quarterback would. Like, he's not going to go through his progressions like an NFL quarterback. He's not going to operate pre-snap like an NFL quarterback. He's not going to operate the huddle because they don't huddle in college. So if you're looking at the film for things that their coaches aren't asking them to do, you're going to come away disappointed in their film. And I think once I was able to, like, turn that part of my brain off, when I wasn't like, I want every person to look like Drew Brees, every college prospect, I think my evaluations of these college prospects got a lot better and became more accurate. Still, having said that, this is a crapshoot. We're all throwing darts at the wall. Sometimes you get some right, sometimes you get some wrong. I think it's about the process, and that's what's so fascinating to me. And I think that's what makes this such a interesting job and such an important job for NFL teams.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think just to bring us back last year, and then we'll kind of dig in a little bit deeper, just CJ Stroud, watching him last year, he looked in the Ohio State offense to me almost like a paint by numbers robotic type of quarterback, right? They scheme stuff up, the receivers get open, he makes the throw. And until you got to that Georgia game at the end, which was literally a one-game sample, you thought, all right, well, when he has to do more in the NFL and he's getting pressure and all these things happen, how is this guy going to react? Then he shows up in the NFL and you realize, oh, wow, this guy's the best processor to come out of college football since Joe Burrow. And before that, who knows how long, maybe Andrew Luck. And when you see that happen, to your point, it makes you think, why am I even trying to figure out processing here when you're almost guessing? And maybe NFL teams can do better sitting in a room with these guys for hours and putting them through plays and stuff. But I think watching the tape is just really hard without knowing exactly what the college is asking of these guys and just the simplicity of the offenses.
No, I think Stroud was a big prospect for me. I think, like, when you do this for a while, there are certain prospects that are like formative prospects for how you evaluate guys. And I think Stroud was a big one for me. Before I watched Stroud, because I'm covering the league throughout the year, so I'm not like a year-round draft guy. So I have to do a lot of catching up in like February and March. And you have these preconceived notions of these prospects because you're like following people, you're talking to people that are watching the film. And I was like, in my mind, Stroud was like a Jared Goff type quarterback where, like, he's going to stand in the pocket. He's not going to scramble much. He's going to get through his reads. He's fairly accurate. He's got a good enough arm. That's the type of quarterback I expected to see. But when you watch him on film, like, there were instances where he did have to create. And the issue with him was, like, he's in this offense where he has all this NFL talent. He has a great scheme. Ohio State's favored by 17 points every week. Like, he never had to scramble. And honestly, if he was scrambling more, there'd be more questions about his processing and his pocket presence. But that Georgia game was so big because it was like, oh, he can do it. And once you have proof that someone can do it, then it really complicates complicates the evaluation, especially with him. So I think that's the perfect example for this dilemma that we have, is like some of these offenses are going to make quarterbacks play a certain way. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play that way in the NFL. Like if you were comparing processing, quote unquote, between Justin Fields at Ohio State and CJ Stroud, you'd think, oh yeah, they're on the same like plane. They're pretty similar in that regard. Then they get to the NFL and it's like, whoa, these guys are worlds apart
right.
in that realm.
No, it's crazy, and I think it makes it very, very difficult here when you take a look at some of these college schemes. And the other thing you have to evaluate, and this goes to the NFL too, the situations these quarterbacks are in. You know, you look at Jayden Daniels play on that LSU offense this year, then you watch Drake Maye play in the UNC offense, and you might as well be watching two different quarterbacks play almost two different sports. You know,
Right. Yeah.
Jayden Daniels just sitting back there with no pressure. He's got two of the top 4 wide receivers in the class wide open all over the place. While Drake Maye is guys not getting open. He's getting pressured every game. He's got to run around like a lunatic. And then you have to figure out, all right, well, in a neutral situation, how are these guys going to operate differently?
Yeah, that's what's so tough. And it's tough at the NFL level where stuff is more comparable. Like you're comparing apples to apples. And like you said, it's not even apples to oranges, it's apples to like a Buick or something. It's like a totally different thing. And I think we tend to like apply attributes to quarterbacks based on the offense. Like for instance, every quarterback that plays in like a Kyle Shanahan style offense is a great processor, and they anticipate and they're accurate. Maybe it's the offense that's doing that, and that's opening these windows, maybe. And like even like the quality of throws, like one thing I've heard is Jayden Daniels is the best vertical thrower in this class. Like he has the best deep ball numbers. You check out the film and he looks the best. But I mean, he was throwing to 2 NFL receivers, like you said, who could win those contested catches downfield and could track the ball so well that it's really hard to gauge his deep accuracy when so much is contingent on how the wide receiver tracks the ball. My comparison that I always use is like, you know, when like you're shooting you have a ball and like your friend's there and he like makes a hoop with his arms and you kind of shoot the ball into the hoop with his arms, and then they'll like kind of move when you shoot it if your shot's off to catch the shot. That doesn't mean you made the shot. That doesn't mean you're Steph Curry and you're a great shooter. That means the guy that was the rim just moved into the way of the ball. I think that's kind of how it works with deep accuracy. I think it's kind of like a fake stat, in my opinion, like the deep accuracy numbers. And that just makes things even more complicated. Like you can't even rely on that. You can't even rely on the fact that you're seeing Jayden Daniels complete passes 40 yards downfield, and you still can't say, I know for a fact he's a great deep ball thrower.
Yeah, I feel like we've almost in the last 10 years, we've gone through some patterns here, right? We went through a time where people were drafting guys based on tools. You go back to Locker, guys like that, and it didn't work out. Then all of a sudden be like, oh, tools guys. I need to see it more in college. Then you get to Josh Allen, and he is the prototypical tools guy. In college, his passes are all over the place. But then, he gets good coaching in the pros. He has accuracy improvement. He figures it out. And I think recently the tools guys are the guys that have been working out more often than the non-tools guys per se. So is that really what you're focusing on now when you look at these quarterbacks, is who has that best package of tools, and you're counting on NFL coaching, NFL schemes to kind of smooth out the rough edges?
Yeah. So like we've said already, there are 2 things that are very hard for us in the public to do. One is translate the scheme and how the next level. The other is, like you said, we don't get to interview these guys. We don't get to sit in the film room and break down reads and be like, why did you read it out like that? So all we can really see on tape are traits, are tools, are the strong arm, are the athleticism. I think there's a little bit of overlap there with like processing. I do think, like, for instance, Jayden Daniels is a good example. There's a lot of criticism about his tendency to scramble out of clean pockets. I think that's processing, but it's also like a trait that's going to translate across schemes. Like being a little uncomfortable in the pocket whenever there's a flash of pressure, that's gonna be the case in a college offense. It's going to be the case in a pro offense. I think that's one of those things that does translate, and we see that in pressure to sack rate numbers, which do translate fairly well. So I think you just got to identify those traits on tape that you can observe. You can observe pocket presence. You can observe arm strength. You can observe accuracy to a certain extent. I think you can observe all those stuff. So that's where I am as an evaluator, is I need to see NFL level talent. And at the quarterback position, I think it's really, the standard is different because you only have one quarterback. You know, that guy has to be your quarterback. it's the only position really in sports where that's the case. Like you could be a number one receiver and you could have another number one receiver on your roster who fills in the gaps that you don't necessarily have in your game. Say you like go to the NBA, you could be a point guard and you could have another point guard style player play along with you. With quarterback, that's not the thing. You only get to play one quarterback. So that guy better be the right guy. He better be a guy that can win you a Super Bowl. Because if you don't have that guy, even if he's a good player, it's kind of a problem to have a guy who's good enough to like get you to the playoffs, but not good enough to win. That creates more problems than being a team that's in the basement and doesn't know what to do at quarterback. Cause at least they know we just need to find a guy. So it's the toughest position in sports to evaluate. Like that's the theme of this podcast for me is it's making it more daunting the more we talk about it.
No, absolutely. No, you're right. If you draft a guy to be a go-to scorer at shooting guard, right? But he doesn't work out. Well, okay, he can be a catch and shoot guy off the bench that shoots 40% on catching 3 shoes, right? If you draft an outside corner, he can fail into safety. He can fail into slot corner. That can work. Quarterback, you really, I think, to the point where you want to do the shoot for the moon thing. Because to your point that you just made, I almost wouldn't even want to draft a quarterback unless I can see in my head a world where he can be in that category with your top 8 guys, however you want to make the cutoff in the NFL with the Lamars, the Herberts, the Burrows, and, that top group. If you can't envision that, I don't want to say what's the point, but what's the point? What's the point?
It sounds like you're giving up. It sounds almost defeatist, but like you need a guy that can compete with Mahomes because that guy's going to be in the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship game every single year.
There's a reason Tom Brady dominated the league for 15 years. I mean,
exactly. And back to my original point, like you need traits to be that guy now. There was a time maybe 20 years ago where you didn't need to have the rocket arm. You didn't need to have the 4.4 speed to be that guy. But the problem with these new elite quarterbacks is they could do the 4.4, the sidearm, the no-look passes, but they can also do the Peyton Manning stuff. Like they're still good at that stuff. I think that's like the most underrated thing about Patrick Mahomes' game is the maturation of his game over the last couple of years. You watch some of these Super Bowl performances, like especially against the Eagles, where he was facing pressure on like half of the dropbacks. His ankle was hurt. He didn't really have receivers that he could count on outside of Kelsey. And he was basically perfect. He was basically perfect with every decision he made, and that's why they won that Super Bowl. So you need a guy who can do both. And as we said, that like mental part is really hard to evaluate in college, but that trait part, that part, the talent part isn't as hard. And I think that's why you should focus on that part.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Yeah, you go back to the Mahomes thing. We remember when the Bengals made that adjustment, right? We're going to rush 3, we're going to drop 8. And that was when Mahomes was still with Tyreek and it was all deep stuff. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to pick you apart methodically with a bunch of 7 to 8 yard passes now and march up and down the field. And you're right. I think it's that adjustment and the fact that guys can do both now, I think really is the difference. And if you don't have that base level of athleticism to make some of those off-schedule special plays with the ability of defensive coordinators now to rush the passer, athletic defensive linemen, if you can't, step up in the pocket, roll to your left, roll your right, throw on the move, it's going to be hard for you to consistently have a productive offense and move the ball just because, frankly, the athletes on defense are that much better now. And offense, people don't realize offense in the league right now is kind of at a low, points are down. You need to have that special stuff in order to sustain success, I think now.
Yeah. And I think as coordinators get better at defending these like new passing concepts, you're seeing mobility be that last option. Like for Mahomes this year, especially his scrambling rates were up. They were the highest they've ever been. And it's because he didn't necessarily have that check down option all the time. So he made his own check down option. So this is like the new level of quarterbacking, whereas like Peyton Manning would be like 1 to 2 to 3 check down, or I throw the ball away. Mahomes gets to go 1 to 2 to 3 check down. Oh, I'm just going to create and make something happen. Right. And by the way, that could end up being like a 60-yard touchdown or like a 30-yard scramble. And when that's the standard, again, you need guys that are equipped with the firepower to do that because these coaches, these defensive coaches are only getting better. Like, did you see Mike McDonald's defense this year in Baltimore? Like, they had a lot of talent. I'm not questioning the talent on that roster, but the way they scheme things up, like that's what the future of defense looks like. He came from the college level, and I think we're going to see more and more guys emulate that style. And if that happens, where like the key to Baltimore's defensive success this year was they took away the deep shots, but they also took away your underneath stuff at the same time. So the only way to win against that is to have a guy that just like can overcome a numbers advantage, a guy that is just so good that it doesn't matter what you do, he's still going to beat you. And we saw the only person that was able to really beat that defense this year was Patrick Mahomes. And he did it by moving out of the pocket, like you said, and making throws on the run.
Yeah, look, I think they've kind of figured out the defensive version of motion for the offense, right? It's coverage changes post snap. So you make the quarterback think a little bit longer, and you kind of do that stuff to make quarterbacks make their life a little bit easier so they can't do exactly what they evaluated based on their pre-snap read. The Huddle is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giant fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. All right, Steven, when you see the traits that we talked about with these college quarterbacks, what aspects do you think can be improved significantly in the NFL? You know, we always used to be told that accuracy can't be improved. I think we're seeing that disproven a little bit now with some of the high-level coaching and mechanical stuff they can do with these quarterbacks. And what stuff do you consider, and maybe it's some of the, pressure to sack stuff, the bailing on pockets, do you consider almost natural instinct that it's hard to coach guys up on, that you would consider red flags? Oh, he's not good at this. I'm not sure he can get better at this. This might really hold them back.
I think it's like the processing part is the easiest part to teach. Like that's typically the thing that only happens if you get good coaching. Like a quarterback isn't naturally going to be good at processing because you have to give them the mental tools to be able to do that. Right. And they're not getting it at the college level. And that's not an indictment of college coaches. Like, I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, these college coaches, they don't coach them up. They don't prepare them. Like, they're trying to win games. They're trying to feed their families. They need to keep their jobs. That's not the expectation I have. But I don't think we should put that expectation on the players either. Like, we should give them room to grow in that realm. And I really think the more you let a quarterback simmer, the more you let him play, like that stuff is just going to come naturally with experience. Like Kirk Cousins wasn't the best processor when he started out in Washington. Like it took him 5 years for the light bulb to really turn on. He didn't have his breakout year till the last year of his rookie contract. But now, like we see, he's just kept getting reps, and he's gotten 10 years of reps, and now he's one of the better processors in the league. And I think that kind of progress is just natural. The things that are hard to teach, obviously, like arm strength and speed, like you can't really teach that. You have to have it. I do think like arm strength, we have seen quarterbacks improve their technique. We have all these throwing gurus now. Like Tom Brady's arm got stronger as he went on. It might have been its strongest when he was in his 40s. But you can't really teach that stuff. But I think it is the pressure to sack stuff. I think that feel in the pocket, that comfort in the pocket, those are instincts. I think that is something that comes to a quarterback naturally. I think you put like young Patrick Mahomes back in the pocket. I'm sure the game just slowed down for him instantly because he's just that type of athlete. This is the type of guy who can slow things down and figure out the best course of action. I think that's the one. And that's why I have some concerns about a prospect like Jayden Daniels, who does have the tools I talked about. Like he probably runs a 4.3. He could throw the ball. He has plenty of arm strength. I don't think he has like a top level arm, but he has plenty of arm strength. But that pressure to sack ratio and his reaction to pressure in the pocket, that's what gives me pause.
Yeah, look, and now let's get into the prospects. And why don't we start with Jayden Daniels? You just went there, so why don't we do that? I'm with you. I think he's a really good runner. I don't think he has that, feel in the pocket like Mahomes does to slide, throw on the move. Once he starts scrambling, he tends to run more than throw, I feel like. He got a little bit better later in the year, throwing on the move a little bit. But I don't see necessarily that pocket feel that you have with the Mahomes, or more importantly, a guy like Caleb Williams that almost seems to have like his like internal GPS where you can sense where players are around him and where spaces to kind of make some of those plays once he gets a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Obviously he has a plan B. His plan B is to take off and scramble.
Not a bad plan, by the way.
Not a bad plan, especially in college, but that plan becomes a little less viable in the NFL when everyone runs a 4.4. And like even the big defensive ends can run a 4.4 in some cases. What I haven't seen on film is the ability to find a plan B within the structure of an offense. Like we said, the best guys can do both. And I haven't seen him be able to do that other thing. I've seen him be able to hit an open receiver if his first read is open. I've seen him be able to go 1 to 2 and get to his second read if his first read isn't open. What I haven't seen him do is his first read's not open. All of a sudden, the pocket is closing in on him. He shuffles, finds space, slides, like you said, Mahomes does, and then makes a throw within the structure of the offense, like he hits a backside dig or whatever. I haven't really seen that. I've seen him do it in a clean pocket. I haven't seen him do it in a muddy pocket. Usually what he does, and like usually when the play works out, it's because he's scrambling and he can outrun everyone on the field. I want to see him beat teams with a second reaction throw within the pocket. I haven't seen it yet. And the reason why I want to see it is because you have to be able to do that in the NFL. Maybe he develops that strength later on, but like I said earlier, you don't see many cases where a guy had pocket presence issues and then they magically got solved in the NFL. Like even a player like Russell Wilson, who even at his peak, at his best, he was not the most comfortable quarterback in the pocket. And that never really got better, even despite the fact that he got all those reps. Like I said, Kirk Cousins got more reps. He stopped making like boneheaded interceptions. He started processing better. We never really saw that with Russ. And we never really see that with any quarterback who has that issue of staying in the pocket when there's pressure in his face.
Yeah, I do think Daniels has a high floor, though, because I do think he's generally an accurate thrower. He can throw deep very well, to the point you made earlier. He has that speed to run. So I think he's a high floor guy. I think the question is the advanced passing on the move type stuff, doing that stuff off schedule within the structure. I think that's where you worry about what the ceiling is. But I think what he does well gives him a fairly high floor.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. I think, like, obviously there are concerns with the size and his ability to take hits and his ability to stay healthy at this next level, because he has some plays on film where don't do that, man. Like he plays like a stunt man at times. He plays like Johnny Knoxville. That's a comp I've heard before. But yeah, I do think that mobility, if he can stay healthy, like we saw with Justin Fields, who's like not the most polished thrower of the football, but we saw when Chicago really leaned into his running ability, the offense became a little more viable, despite the fact that they had a weak offensive line. They had some holes in the receiving core, even after the DJ Moore trade. I do think mobility in this day and age in the NFL really sets the floor. Whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago is more about like accuracy and processing and stuff like that. But you can build a good run game if your quarterback can just run. It doesn't matter what pieces you have around him, just because of the numbers advantages that creates. Like defense has to play 11 on 11, whereas against a immobile quarterback, they play 10 on 11 in the run game because the quarterback's not doing anything after he hands off the ball. So I agree with you there. I think his floor is a little higher than people realize. I think the question should be about his ceiling and his capacity to become a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert type quarterback.
And that's where I think Caleb Williams is interesting. And I want to hit him next, because that type of, feel in the pocket is off the charts for him. His ability to make those throws on the run with touch, either with velocity or touch, depending on the play, I think is phenomenal. But going back to, I think, my first question to you, watching him in the structure of that USC offense, I mean, it's hard. It's kind of like it's like a designer play to hit one guy that's open. If he's not open, everyone else kind of just stops. And he's like, all right, Caleb, go figure it out. And to his credit, he's great at doing it. But that's something where I wonder about get the 1 to 2 to 3 on time, that sort of stuff. Those are where my questions are with Caleb. But I feel like in the right system, in the right coaching in the NFL, he's going to get there. And that's why I think his going to be the number one pick and should be.
That's my read on the situation. And I think he really got a raw deal, because Lincoln Riley has been producing these quarterbacks and he's been providing them with these structures that are so easy to play in for a quarterback. Yeah. Relatively speaking, the quarterback's always hard to play. But that wasn't the case at USC this year. When you watch that film, that was a bad offense. And I'm not just talking about the talent around him. I'm talking about the scheme, the play calling. It's not just like the plays were always, there's only one viable target on it. Sometimes there are RPOs attached to a lot of what turned out to be pass attempts, where the offensive line's not even blocking and trying to make a pocket. They're trying to block for the run game, and he has to navigate that mess in front of him with like pulling guards and stuff. But I do think, like, if you really watch the film, you watch him down to down, you see that quarterback stuff. You see flashes of him being able to be that quarterback who is reliable down to down, the guy that can stay in the pocket and go 1 to 2 to 3. He just wasn't asked to do it in USC's offense. And really, that would have been a luxury for him. He wasn't allowed to do that because he wasn't able to do that, because if he did, USC would have lost by 20 points every game. It's amazing that they scored as many points as they did, and they won as many games as they did. And it's a testament to how good that quarterback is. To me, he's the best prospect I've ever scouted. I haven't been doing it for that long, so that wasn't meant to be like some hot take, but I didn't expect to like him more than I liked Trevor Lawrence, who had previously been the best prospect I had ever scouted. But man, he's got that extra gear. He does have that Mahomes thing. I don't think the Mahomes comps are crazy. And
No,
I usually when I hear Mahomes comps, I like roll my eyes, like the Zach Wilson stuff, like, oh, he's Mahomes, he's that Aaron Rodgers. Like, no, nobody's that guy. But you turn on the tape with Caleb, and he has that quick twitch reaction. It's not like the quick twitch athleticism. It's like, I see the guy open and I process what I have to do to get the ball to him. Like, I see the defender has leverage inside, so I throw it outside. I see the defender has leverage like underneath the receiver, so I throw it over the top of his head. I have a guy about to hit me, about to smack me in the face, and I process all of that in like 0.3 seconds, and then I make the throw. And the throw is usually like 40 yards downfield, and then it's on target. Like, he's accurate, he has arm strength. His accuracy doesn't fall off when he has to put a little more zip on the ball. His accuracy doesn't fall off when he has to move outside of the pocket. He keeps his eyes up for the most part when he is flushed out of the pocket. He remains a passer at all times until he is forced to scramble, basically. And when he does scramble, he makes magic happen. God, I'm getting worked up just talking about him. I'm a Panthers fan, and it makes me sad every time I turn on his film that they traded this pick away.
Oh, I know. I can only imagine. No, I think with what they have around Bryce, for your sake, I think he'll be a lot better this year.
Yeah.
Given what they had to deal with last year, which was just a nightmare. Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens. Named a 2022 best bank in the U.S. by The Banker as the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle. Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. All right, Steven, let's hit the other quarterbacks here. Let's get to Drake Maye. He's my quarterback too. And I'll be very simple about it. One, I think he's very good at making those scrambles on third downs to get some critical first downs. I think people underrate his athleticism for one. But more importantly, just look at the Georgia Tech game. I mean, my God, these throws in the middle of the field in track, it looked like he's throwing into a team meeting, but he knows to get in exactly the right spot to complete these passes. And even more than Caleb, than any other quarterback in this class, he has more of those middle of the field, intermediate, 10 to 25 yard middle of the field throws that I think you need to have the guts to throw and the brain to throw in the NFL. That's going to translate. I know he's scattershot a little bit and some of the decision making fine. No one's getting open. His protection sucked for most of the year. I'm going to give him a pass on those two things. I love his upside. If he gets coached up, I think he's going to be a fantastic quarterback.
He's what it looks like. He's what it looks like when you watch. That's what great quarterbacks look like when they throw the football. And we talked about how impossible that offense was to watch, and how impossible it is to like translate it to the next level. But he's so good that he made it easy to translate his game to the next level. Like, that's how good he was. He stood out from the rest of the offense. I do have some of the concerns you kind of laid out. Like, he is a little scattershot. He's got a little Sam Darnold in him. That's what I'll say. There's a little bit of Sam Darnold in him.
And I was a Sam Darnold believer, so maybe I'm falling into the same trap again. I don't know.
Darnold was my QB2 in that class. So that was another formative class for me. That really changed the way I look at quarterbacks. But man, he makes the throws you have to make to be a top-level NFL quarterback. It's those little things that he has to shore up. And it's not the stuff that I said you can't really teach. Like, he has the instinct in the pocket. He can deal with pressure. He knows what to do when there's pressure in his face. He can deal with it either going to his right, going to his left, stepping up in the pocket, which I think he does better than a lot of the quarterbacks in this class. And then he also can throw off his back foot, which I think is like a new tool that quarterbacks really are leaning into, especially the top level quarterbacks. Like Jordan Love is the best example, who he throws that fadeaway ball that's so hard to defend. And that's what makes his play under pressure so good. And I think Drake Maye has that. He made one throw, I'm forgetting the game, but it was a back foot throw that traveled like 50 yards through the air, and it was a touchdown. It was just an amazing throw. And I was like, yeah, that's enough. That's all I need to see. Like, I'm taking that top 5 every single year. but he does have like other parts to his game. It's not just the flash. There's something there to him. He's a good quarterback. He knows what he's doing. You could see that. I can't wait to see him in a real offense, like a real NFL, a drop back passing offense. I think he's going to be so much better than he was in college. And he was damn good in college.
I agree. All right, let's get to McCarthy. This is kind of the Giant fan debate that's been happening. I'm not sure how much you've seen it. And I think McCarthy's interesting. I think he's going to be a pretty good NFL quarterback. But to the point I made to you earlier, I have trouble envisioning him becoming that top 8 level player. I like the way he throws over the middle of the field. I think he's accurate. I don't like the deep ball. I don't think he has great touch. And he never really had to play from behind and things of that nature that make things more difficult on quarterbacks. What's your overall take on McCarthy?
Yeah, I liked him better than I thought I would. He's
so did I.
The type of quarterback I tend to go for. I watched him a little bit earlier in the year, like in September and October. I had more energy. You know, the season hadn't really kicked in, so I was watching college film. By December, that was done. But I caught up with his film recently, and I really did like him a lot better than I thought I would. I'm agreeing with you a lot. Like, my main concern is the touch thing. I do think he has a strong arm, but I think it's sort of like the Zach Wilson thing where he can really whip it when he has the time and space to do it. But when there are defenders around, there are big bodies around, the arm looks a little bit weaker. And I don't think I think he has arm strength. I don't know if he has arm talent.
And when he had to do that back foot fadeaway stuff, I feel like the accuracy degraded a lot with him on tape.
Yeah, that's another thing. And that's why I don't really think he has arm talent, so to speak. I don't think he can make a variety of throws. He can throw the fastball, but he doesn't have the curveball. He doesn't have the slider. He doesn't have the off-speed stuff that Mahomes has, that Joe Burrow definitely has, because Joe Burrow doesn't really have the great fastball that all these great quarterbacks have. This is going to be a weird comparison, but I just mean this strictly about like the types of throws he can make. He reminds me a lot of Cam Newton, because Cam Newton, and I'm a big Cam Newton fan. He's my favorite quarterback of all time as a Panthers fan. But Cam Newton could never throw with touch. He could never get it up and over the second level of the defense. He always had to throw stuff on a line, which limited the type of throws he could make and affected his accuracy, like you said. And he was deemed an inaccurate quarterback because of that. I don't think Cam was an inaccurate quarterback. I just don't think he had the finesse with his arm to make all the throws. And I would say the same thing about McCarthy. Like, you watch his film, I don't think anyone would be like, oh yeah, this is an inaccurate guy. But in those instances, he really does have trouble getting the ball to the receiver.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New You moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
No, I'm with you. And I guess the question I have, and look, we know Daniel Jones has had issues in the pros, staying healthy being one. The situation around him has not been good at all. But I guess my question is the overall package enough of an upgrade where you're foregoing a potential legitimate number one level wide receiver or number one offensive tackle, if you want to go there. I'm more the wide receiver crew. That's fine. Or even having to trade up, because I don't think one of these 4 quarterbacks is going to be there when the Giants pick at 6. Between the Broncos, the Vikings, and the Raiders, someone's going to try to move in there, I think, to grab this 4th quarterback. And I just wonder if the upside is big enough and the upgrade is big enough to make that type of move and forego that other legitimate blue chip talent at a premium position when you're making that pick, if McCarthy ends up being the 4th guy.
No, I don't think he has that upside. I really don't. And I'm of the opinion that if I'm drafting a quarterback in the 1st round, I want him to have that upside. Whether he's like a project and it's a long shot, or he's more of a finished project, but it's easy to envision what he is. I think with McCarthy, there's a wide range of outcomes, but I don't think on the high end, like, elite quarterback play is in that range of outcomes. And that's what scares me. Like, I would be elated to take him at the top of the 2nd round. I would even consider taking him at the bottom of the 1st round, where I think the thinking changes a little bit with quarterbacks.
And hell, if you're the Broncos and you pick him at 13, I get that too. I understand that.
But yeah, I'm not reaching for him. And I think, like, if you're the Giants, especially, you kind of get stuck in the same place you were with Jones, where, like, I was high on Jones coming into the draft. I know a lot of people were low on him. They're like, I can't believe this kid's even considered a 1st round prospect. When you watch that Duke film, he had no chance behind that Duke offensive line and with that Duke receiving core. Like he literally had like the worst offensive line in terms of pressure allowed, and then one of the worst receiving cores in terms of drops. I don't know how you kind of win as a quarterback when you have those circumstances. But I saw Jones as like a mid first round pick. Like if you took him with the 20th pick, I would be really happy. And I feel the same way about McCarthy. 6 is just a little too high. It's a little too rich for my blood. I agree. I think if you put him in the right system, if you put him in Minnesota, where they have a good young offensive line, they obviously have receivers to throw to with Jefferson. And then he has a scheme that I think will play to his strengths because they run a lot of play action. They're not asking him to go get a bucket as like an ISO scorer, you know? I think it could work. It could look like a lot like how things look for Brock Purdy in San Francisco. But if you're expecting him to be the guy that elevates your offense, which is what you're looking for if you're taking a guy in the top 10, I think you're going to be disappointed.
You have time to roll through Nix and Penix real quick?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Penix. Unlike McCarthy, I like Penix a little bit less when I watched him on tape. I watched his last 6 games of the year, and I watched his early film earlier in the year. And he's not a bad quarterback. I think as a day 2 guy, it's fine. But, boy, we talked about Daniels and his lack of creation. That's Penix. Penix is that on steroids, right? Like, pressure comes, he just tries to get the ball out. I don't think he's as accurate as some people think he is, because a lot of time his guys are wide open and he hits them. And there's not a lot of those middle of the field, small window throws either. So I'm not as big on him as other people are who think he could be a first-round pick. I think that would be a mistake if a team decides to pick him in the first round.
Yeah, Penix is one of those quarterbacks, just given his situation, his evolution in college, like starting at Indiana, obviously going through the injury concerns, and then landing in this really an ideal spot for a quarterback prospect. And then the fact that he ran a 4.4 at his pro day, and I know it's a pro day time, but apparently he's got 4.4 speed, and it didn't show up on film
ever.
It's such a hard evaluation. Like he was in clean pockets. He was throwing to NFL receivers with NFL catch radiuses. Like that's the thing that really makes judging his accuracy hard, is like Adunze like could catch any ball. You just throw it in his vicinity and he was going to haul it in. My problem with Penix, and maybe it's like an aesthetic thing, is it's something I'm laughing about, the fact that he's left-handed and kind of throws with a sidearm delivery, but like we're humans and we have human eyes, and it's really hard to like get over how it looks when he throws a football. It doesn't look like what it typically looks like. I said like Drake Maye, that's what it looks like. Penix, like that's what it doesn't look like. That's not what an NFL quarterback looks like. But at the same time, there are some examples of a quarterback that doesn't throw the ball like prototypically that works out. Like Phillip Rivers, for instance, throws a lot like Michael Penix, and I've seen some people compare them. I don't think that comparison is good at all. But it's the quarterback stuff that kind of falls short for me. I do think he has a strong arm and he can zip it. I just don't think he's the processor that you would want to see out of a 5th-year prospect. He is not Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is like the only prospect I can remember in the last decade who kind of stayed longer than you expect a pro prospect to stay in college, and didn't have like the hot start to the beginning of his career in college. But you could see the NFL processing on tape. You could really see it in that offense. You don't see it with Penix. He looks like a prototypical college quarterback. He looks like a guy who is a year older than everybody else he's playing with. Like that was his advantage last year. And that's hard for me to get over. I don't see any top level NFL quarterback plays on his film. And I'm not really exaggerating there. He did not use that 4.4 speed. If that timing is true, he did not use that at all. And the times he did try to scramble out of the pocket, it wasn't a Stroud situation where Stroud didn't have to create out of structure because the structure was so good. There were times when he had an opportunity to create out of structure and he just couldn't do it. He got caught by a defensive lineman in the Pac-12. How is that going to look in the NFL when you're going up against like first-round athletes? I don't see the upside with him.
Yeah, and look, that scheme was so good and his receivers are so good. These guys are wide open a lot of the times down the field, and you just didn't have to see that sort of NFL stuff. I'm with you. I understand why, and I feel like Bo Nix is like the former NFL quarterback's favorite quarterback in this draft. Like I think Kurt Warner even had that in one of his tweets, right, where he's like, "Yeah, I see Bo Nix because he takes, even though he's in gun, he does the 3 steps, the ball comes out." 5 steps, ball comes out. The problem is that it immediately comes out to a guy that's like 6 yards down the field. And I just don't know about his arm strength and making those NFL level throws in those intermediate to deep areas. But I understand why these people watch him and they're like, all right, this guy looks like he knows how to play the position because the ball seems to come out on time and pretty accurately.
Kurt was like, oh, this looks like me. This was like me in that greatest show on turf offense. The ball just got to come out, and Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce, they'll be where I expect them to be. But yeah, in the one thing that kind of turned me off with this film was a lot of like, not pump fakes, because pump fakes are intentional, but a lot of like hesitancy when throwing the football.
Hitches.
A lot of like, a lot of hitches, a lot of cocking the ball, a lot of, and he would do it to a guy that he would end up throwing to. Like, I know Warner loved his Oregon State tape, but I thought that was all over his Oregon State tape. He made it like a great backside throw to a dig route, but he kind of hesitated like 3 times before he finally let the ball go. In the NFL, you don't have that time. You don't have that margin for error. And that's what I want to see. And he's another one of these guys where, I know I said earlier, I'm kind of contradicting myself, where you shouldn't expect to see like NFL level play and NFL level processing from these guys. But when you're like a 5th-year senior and you've been in the game so long and you're closer to a finished product than these other guys, you do kind of want to see that stuff already. He needs to be able to play from day one, because if he can't, and he's like 26 by the time he gets into the lineup, it's really tough to catch up, to make up that ground that the other younger guys who got a earlier start have on you. So that's my concern with him, is not only like the talent, the physical talent, which I agree with you on. It's the conviction in his decision making, and it's the fact that we're still seeing that hesitancy at this point in his development.
Do you think any other quarterback could go before Penix and or Nix as quarterbacks 5 and 6 in this draft, and who would it be?
We were talking before we started recording about Spencer Rattler, and I've talked myself into him, but I really think NFL teams are talking themselves into him. Like at the combine, the one thing you heard, the thing with him was always about like, I don't want to say character issues, but like attitude issues. And it was based off that documentary he was on. I think it was LeBron James's QB1 documentary, where he was acting like a jerk, but he was also like 17 years old. And I don't know about you, but when I was 17 years old and hanging around my friends, I was kind of a jerk.
We all are.
I don't want to hold that against him, but apparently at South Carolina, he really put his head down and put in the work, and the coaches loved him. So I think even that part of the evaluation is starting to turn for him. And if you turn on the tape, he obviously has a talent. He has a few processing issues, but those things can be ironed out in the pros. I think a team might talk themselves into drafting Spencer Rattler, whereas like a 24-year-old quarterback with questionable track record of production and some injury concerns, I think might slip in the draft.
That's interesting. All right, final question, because we all look at these guys because it's fun. Who's your favorite wide receiver and why?
I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. I know that's the boring pick, and I know he doesn't like create the most separation, but he's the surest thing. He knows how to run routes. He gets open early in the routes. He gets open downfield. He makes contested catches. He catches with his hands, which is the one thing I don't like about Malik Neighbors. He's kind of a body catcher. He does it all. He does everything you want in a receiver. And then he could play that prototypical X role where he can line up on the line of scrimmage. He could deal with press. And I think there are question marks with the other guys in that regard.
All right, Steven, tell the folks where they can read all your stuff and then listen to you in terms of the Ringer Podcast Network.
Yeah, I'm on the Ringer NFL show, Dual Threat with Nora Princiati. And then I also have the quarterback rankings, which during the season I update every week, but you can come and look at those. We have attribute grades for all this, like accuracy, arm strength, decision making, all that good stuff. We have write-ups on every quarterback. So it's not just quarterback rankings. There's actual scouting reports on every single guy. That's at theringer.com. Awesome.
Steven, this was a lot of fun, man. It was great doing this with you. Let's do it again soon and enjoy this 3-week sprint to the draft, my friend.
Yeah, I had a blast anytime.
Steven Ruiz from The Ringer. Thanks for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast. We'll see you next time, everybody.